During the test, we scored the participants' breathing rates by while they were cycling, we would look at their chests and carry the time a breath was taken in. This can be unreliable as it is done by the human eye. From the normative data, their breathing rate at the start of the exercise will increase due to the intensity increase and the working muscles require more oxygen, so therefore the body then takes in more breaths in less time. However, after this happens, the participant's breathing rate will then reach the body's demands and eventually plateau until the end of exercise, and then their breathing rate will slowly drop back down to its original rate. As we can see here from Max's, that this does occur for him, as we see a plateau after 8 minutes. Despite this occurring for Max, like the normative data, it isn't exactly the same due to his breathing rate being too high throughout the exercise, and there is no real increase in his breathing rate. This, however, does occur for Summer and Josh, as their breathing rate throughout the whole exercise stays between 20 and 36. Despite this, from the graph, their results are nothing like the normative data, as for Summers especially, neither of their rates plateau during the exercise, as they are either increasing or decreasing at some point. This may have been to do with them not working hard enough so that their body could not meet their full demands and not plateau. As we see for both of them, their breathing rate decreases, and this should not happen at all during the exercise and only occur after the exercise has been completed. The first stage of the aerobic energy system is an aerobic system, as it contains oxygen to aid with removal of the lactic acids. The system starts off with the breakdown of glycogen into glucose, using glycogen phosphorylase and phosphofructinase to turn it into pyruvic acid, which results in production of two phosphate molecules to create adenosine triphosphate and lactic acid. Despite this, this includes oxygen, so it removes the lactic acids. Then pyruvic joint with coenzyme A, which is a catalyst to make acyl-CoA, which then bonds with oxalate acid from citric acid. Stage 2 consists of citric acid, then enters the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle consists of CO2 with a byproduct of breathing is hydrogen, oxalic acid, and 2 moles of phosphate. The third and final stage is where we take hydrogen from the Krebs cycle and place it in the electron transport chain. Once this happens, it is then carried by two carrier molecules NAD+ and FADH. FADH. These are then split into hydrogen ions H+, and hydrogen electrons H-. The H+ ions creates H2O, and the H- electrons create 34 moles of phosphate, which can be used to resynthesize adenosine triphosphate multiple times. This energy system is used for long endurance events such as the marathon, as the ATP can be resynthesized multiple times. This reaction also takes place in the sarcoplasm. The byproducts of this energy system is oxalic acid. The controlling enzymes in the systems are phosphocrutinase, glycogen phosphorylase, coenzymes A and acetylCoA. The ATP yield of this energy system is 34 moles of phosphates. The duration of this energy system can last up to 1 hour. Steady-state exercise is activity that achieves a balance between the energy required by working muscles and the rate of oxygen delivery for anaerobic ATP production. An example of this would be training exercise such as steady jogging or cycling on a bike for 45 to 50 minutes. It must be at a steady rate or it will change to being an anaerobic or high-level aerobic exercise. This would mean that there wouldn't be a balance between the energy required by working muscles and the rate of oxygen and delivery for aerobic ATP. Heart rate is the speed at which the heart beats. Before exercise happens, there is already an increase in heart rate. This is called the anticipatory rise, which is due to the anticipation of the exercise. This occurs due to the release of neurotransmitters called adrenaline and noradrenaline. During a long period of time performing steady-state exercise, particularly in hot climates, there will be a steady-state heart rate that will gradually increase. This is known as cardiac drift and occurs to an increase in body temperature. Stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped from the left ventricle per beat. When we exercise, there is an increase in stroke volume and venous return. This is where there is an increase in the volume of blood which stretches the cardiac muscle to a greater degree. When the stretching happens, this makes heart rate contraction much stronger and allows more blood to be pumped out during each contraction. The average stroke volume for the average adult at rest is 70 milliliters per beat. However, for an elite athlete in good shape, then the mean stroke volume can be nearly as half. A factor that affects the participant's stroke volume is venous return. This is the volume of blood that enters back into the heart via the vena cava. The higher the volume of blood that enters the heart during diastole, the higher the stroke volume will be. The average resting stroke volume for a healthy human being is 70 to 80 milliliters, whereas Mo Farah's is 110 milliliters, which is a huge difference and allows him to do more exercise for a longer and higher intensity. This will have come from all the training he would have taken part in that aids this, as he needs his stroke volume to be high for his events that he takes part in. Cardiac output is the amount of blood pumped by the heart per minute. When we exercise, there is an increase in cardiac output. This is due to the fact that the heart will beat faster and pump more blood out every beat. The heart's heart rate also increases, therefore meaning that there are more beats, so even more blood is pumped around the body. Cardiac output also increases due to the redistribution of blood flow to the working muscles. The average cardiac output at rest for a healthy human with a heart rate of 70 times a minute is 4,900 milliliters. However, Mo Farah has a heart rate of 33 beats per minute and has a cardiac output of 3,603 milliliters per minute. Blood flow is the movement of blood through a vessel, tissue, or organ. During exercise, the working muscles need a greater amount of blood due to the supply them with energy. The body will then redirect blood flow by constricting the blood vessels leading to organs that are not required, such as a large blood flow, and enlarging the blood vessels feeding the muscles that do. When blood vessels constrict, this is called vasoconstriction, and when they enlarge, this is called vasodilation. Blood pressure is the pressure of blood in the circulatory system during exercise. Blood pressure reduces due to the blood vessels feeding the working muscles. Despite this, there is also an increase in blood pressure due to an increase in cardiac output. When we exercise, this raises systolic pressure, but only a slight raise in diastolic pressure. After exercise, there is an immediate drop in systolic pressure due to the skeletal muscles no longer pumping blood from the muscles to the heart. Thermogradation is a process that allows your body to maintain its core internal temperature. When we exercise, the body produces excess heat, but our body needs to be able to lose this excess heat so that its core temperature does not increase. The cardiovascular system is used to do this. The excess heat is lost through sweating and enlarging of peripheral blood vessels, so therefore blood passes close to the surface of the skin. As the sweat evaporates, it cools down the skin surface, which cools the blood as it travels through the blood vessels that are close to the skin surface. Starling's law theory states that stroke volume will increase in response to an increase in blood volume filling the heart. When this occurs, this leads to a stretch in the ventricular walls, causing the cardiac muscle to contract more. This isn't the only reason why the stroke volume of the participant might increase to a stronger contraction in the cardiac muscles during exercise. Therefore, the reduced heart rate of a trained athlete allows a greater filling during the long diastole, so the stretch of the cardiac muscle is greater. Breathing rate is the number of breaths per minute. As the intensity of an exercise increases, the breathing rate also increases. However, in steady-state exercise, the participant's breathing rate will increase at the start of the exercise when the exercise starts, but will eventually plateau and remain constant throughout the exercise, as the participant's body will have reached their demands and won't require an increase in the oxygen intake. After we exercise, we take in deeper breaths to recover as more oxygen is required. Tidal volume is the amount of air passing into and out of the lungs during breathing. When we exercise, we require more oxygen to the working muscles and around the body. This then causes an increase in our tidal volume, as tidal volume is the volume of air breathed in a single breath. This increase in tidal volume will occur at the start of steady-state exercise, but after around 4 minutes, the participant's tidal volume will plateau due to reaching the body's demands and will remain constant throughout the rest of exercise. Oxygen dissociative curve is a curve determined by plotting on a graph the partial pressure of oxygen in blood as the abscissa and the percentage of hemoglobin combined with oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin as the ordinate. Oxygen is mostly transported in the blood by hemoglobin. Oxygen reacts with hemoglobin to make oxyhemoglobin. The reaction of oxygen with hemoglobin is temporary, but they can also separate. The binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin is dependent on the partial pressure of oxygen. Oxygen then combines with hemoglobin in areas of the body where there is a lot of oxygen, such as the lungs. Changes in blood carbon dioxide level and hydrogen ion concentration causes shifts in the oxygen. These shifts enhance oxygen release in tissues and increase in oxygen uptake in the lungs. When we exercise, our blood becomes more acidic because of the increased production of carbon dioxide. A muscle spindle is a skeletal muscle sensory receptor within the body of a muscle that primarily detects change in the length of this muscle, contributing to fine motor control and providing axial and limb position information to the central nervous system. The responses of muscle spindles to the changes in length also plays an important role in regulating the contraction of muscles by activating motor neurons via the stretch reflex to resist muscle strength. The vascular shunt is the distribution of blood around the body, directing it to where it is required most. For example, during exercise, the cardiovascular system redirects the blood so that more of it goes to the working muscles and less of it goes to the other body organs such as the digestive system. The role of the Golgi tendon organ is to sense muscular tension within muscles when they are contracting or stretching. When it is activated during contraction, it causes inhibition of the contraction, which is an automatic reflex. However, when activated during stretching, it inhibits muscle spindle activity within the working muscles so a deeper stretch can be performed. The Golgi tendon organ are also sensitive to changes in tension and rate of tension and because they are located in the musculoskeletal junctions, they are therefore responsible for sending information to the brain as soon as they sense an overload. For example, when a static stretch is being performed, this is when muscle tension signals the Golgi tendon organs to respond. Our first hypothesis consists of Summers' heart rate initially increasing in comparison to rest but will plateau at around 3 minutes. As we can see here, we have the initial increase from rest, but carries on increasing until 8 where it eventually plateaus, so our hypothesis was not correct. We also predicted that during steady-state exercise there will be a low amount of lactic acid, where we can measure this by using the lactate monitor and O2 saturation. We can see that this is the case for Summer, as her O2 saturation doesn't drop drastically at all and stays between 95 and 100, which is what would normally happen during steady-state exercise, as there isn't that much build of lactic acid because it's not anaerobic respiration. We finally predicted that Summer's breathing rate will initially increase, but at the minutes of 3 to 18 the breathing rate will plateau. This was not the case for Summer, as her breathing rate gradually increased up to 12 minutes and then decreased to 16 minutes and then increased after 20 minutes, so our hypothesis was not correct.